I remember the exact moment I realized I had spent 15 years of my life working myself to the bone, skipping sleep, skipping meals, skipping myself, for people who were never even paying attention. It wasn't a dramatic moment. Nobody was watching. I was standing in my kitchen at 11 o'clock at night, holding an award I had just won, and I felt absolutely nothing. Not proud, not relieved, just empty. And in that silence, one thought surfaced so clearly it almost knocked me over. Whose life have I actually been living? If you have ever worked so hard to prove someone wrong that you completely forgot to prove yourself right, this story is for you. Stay with me. Every single minute of this video exists for one reason, to hand you back something that was quietly taken from you. If this channel speaks to your soul, subscribe right now, hit that bell, and let's begin. Because what I'm about to tell you, nobody has ever said it quite like this. I didn't grow up in a house full of cruelty. That's what made it so confusing for so long. There was no villain, no monster. Just a quiet, suffocating kind of love that came wrapped in conditions I could never fully meet. My mother was a woman who had given up her own dreams so early in life that she had forgotten she ever had them. She worked hard, she sacrificed everything, and somewhere along the way she confused exhaustion with virtue. In our house, rest was laziness. Dreaming too big was embarrassing. And wanting something just because it made you happy, well, that was practically selfish. My father measured worth in numbers, income, grades, titles. He wasn't a cold man. He laughed, he showed up, he tried in the ways he knew how. But his love always felt like it came with a scorecard, and I was always just 1 point short of whatever passing looked like that week. I was the eldest daughter. And if you know, you know. There's a particular kind of pressure that gets placed on the firstborn girl in a family, invisible, unspoken, but as heavy as concrete. You become the example, the standard, the one who is supposed to hold everything together while quietly disappearing into the background. You learn to be capable before you learn to be comfortable. You learn to be responsible before you ever learn to be free. And I absorbed all of it. Every single lesson. I became a master of shrinking. Not in a way anyone could point to, but in the way I stopped raising my hand even when I knew the answer. In the way I apologized for taking up space in a conversation. In the way I made myself smaller and softer and quieter in every room so that the people around me could feel bigger. The first time someone told me I couldn't do something, I was 11 years old. I had drawn a collection of clothing designs in a notebook. Little sketches, nothing serious, just something that poured out of me like breathing. My aunt picked up that notebook, flipped through it, and laughed. Not meanly, just casually. The way you laugh at something that doesn't deserve to be taken seriously. She said, "Fashion? That's not a real career, sweetheart. That's a hobby for rich girls." I closed that notebook. I didn't open another one for almost 3 years, and that is where the pattern began. Not with heartbreak, not with failure. With one careless laugh from someone who forgot about it 5 minutes later while I carried it for years. By the time I was in my early 20s, I had turned that closed notebook into a full-blown mission. I was going to prove every single person wrong. I enrolled in a fashion design program, graduated near the top of my class, landed a competitive internship at a well-known clothing house, and walked into that industry with fire in my chest. But the fire wasn't warm. Looking back now, I can see that it was the kind of fire that burns through its fuel too fast. Because it was running on anger, not passion. I wasn't designing because I loved it. I was designing to win. And those two things look the same from the outside, but feel completely different on the inside. I worked harder than anyone in that room. I came in early, I stayed late, I said yes to every project that nobody else wanted, and still, I was passed over. Looked through, talked around. There was a colleague. I won't say much about her, except that she had a gift for taking other people's ideas and presenting them in her own voice, loudly and confidently, in front of the right people at the right time. And it worked. It kept working. While I stayed quiet and capable in the corner, she moved up and I stayed still. I had a mentor once who I genuinely admired, a woman who had built a real name for herself. I thought she would see something in me, pull me forward the way people always say the right mentor can. Instead, she looked at my portfolio one afternoon and said, "It's good, but it's too emotional. People don't want to feel things when they look at clothes. They want to look expensive." She said it like it was advice. I took it like a wound. I changed my work. I stripped the feeling out of it, made it cleaner, colder, more commercial, and yes, people started noticing it more. Which only made everything more confusing, because I was being praised for work that didn't feel like mine. I was winning with a version of myself I had manufactured to please other people. And every small victory felt hollow, because the person collecting the prize wasn't really me. Then came the Regional Design Award, a real one, juried, competitive, meaningful in the industry. I won it. I stood at that ceremony, I accepted the certificate, I smiled for the photograph, and driving home that night, I waited for the feeling, the relief, the joy, the something. It never came, because I had won it for them, for my mother, who I had called before the ceremony, for my father, who I had hoped would finally say something that sounded like, "I'm proud of you," without the word "but" attached to it, for my aunt and her careless laugh, for every person who had ever made me feel like I wasn't enough. The award was never for me. It was a message I was sending to people who weren't even listening. And somewhere in that quiet drive home, something very small and very important cracked open inside of me. Around that same time, I was in a relationship that I had convinced myself was love. He was steady and calm and safe, and I needed all three of those things desperately. But looking back, what I actually was in that relationship was manageable. He liked me best when I was uncertain, when I needed reassurance, when I was one step behind instead of one step ahead. He never said anything cruel. He was far too subtle for that. He just had this very quiet way of dimming things. A slight pause before he complimented my work. A small sigh when I talked about a new idea. A gentle redirect whenever a conversation drifted toward my ambitions rather than our plans. And I let it happen. Because somewhere deep down, I believed I needed his approval too. He was just another judge in a courtroom I had been standing in my whole life, trying to prove I was worthy of existing as I was. The end of that relationship didn't come with a fight or a revelation. It came on an ordinary Tuesday evening. We were having dinner and he said something, I don't even remember what it was, and I laughed. And the sound of my own laugh was so unfamiliar to me that it stopped me cold. It wasn't my laugh. It was the laugh I had learned to use around him. Soft, unassuming, quick to fade. I had been so busy becoming someone he could be comfortable with that I had replaced myself entirely. I left 2 weeks later. I didn't explain it well. I couldn't. How do you tell someone that you're not leaving because of anything they did, but because of everything you stopped being? The months after that were the quietest of my life. And quiet, when you've been running on noise your whole life, feels terrifying at first. The career had stalled. Not failed, just stalled. But in a world that only values forward motion, stalled looks identical to sinking. I was in my late 20s. I had an impressive resume and a deeply unimpressive sense of self. I moved into a smaller apartment because it made financial sense, and everyone I knew called it downgrading. I called it the first honest square footage I had ever lived in. The depression crept in the way it always does. Not all at once, but piece by piece. A morning here where getting up felt impossible. An afternoon there where the thought of trying one more time felt genuinely laughable. I kept showing up to things, kept answering messages, kept performing the version of fine that I had perfected over decades. But inside, I was exhausted in a way that sleep couldn't touch. People around me were moving. Friends were getting married, getting promoted, posting pictures of lives that looked assembled and purposeful. And I was in a smaller apartment with a stalled career and a laugh that didn't belong to me yet, trying to figure out what I actually wanted from a life I had never once designed for myself. One night, I remember it was raining, the kind of rain that sounds like it has something to say. I ended up on my bathroom floor. Not dramatically, not in crisis, just out of places to hold myself together. And sitting there, I asked myself one question, the most important question I have ever asked. I said it out loud, alone, to no one. Who am I actually trying to impress? The silence that followed that question was the loudest thing I have ever heard. I sat with that question for a long time, and then the answers started coming. Slowly, honestly, like water finding its level. I was trying to impress my mother, a woman who had spent so long being unsatisfied with her own life that satisfaction in anyone else made her uncomfortable. Her criticism was never really about me. It was about a grief she had never properly named. I was trying to impress my father, a man who showed love through expectations because nobody had ever shown him another way. His scorecard wasn't about my worth. It was about his fear. I was trying to impress an ex-boyfriend who needed me small so he could feel sufficient. I was trying to impress colleagues who were too busy protecting their own positions to ever genuinely celebrate mine. I was trying to impress an industry that rewarded coldness and called it sophistication. I had built my entire identity around a race I never agreed to enter, on a track someone else had laid, toward a finish line nobody had ever shown me. And the most heartbreaking part? Every time I crossed a finish line, every award, every promotion, every moment of external validation, I felt nothing, because you cannot fill a wound with a trophy. You cannot heal a lifelong hunger for belonging by winning something. The approval I was chasing was never going to come from them, because the approval I actually needed could only ever come from me. That realization didn't feel like a lightning bolt. It felt like a window slowly opening in a room that had been sealed shut for years. Fresh air, but gently, slowly, almost cautiously, as if the room itself needed time to remember what breathing felt like. I went back to fashion, but I want you to understand how differently I went back. I didn't go back with a plan to rebuild a career. I didn't go back with a pitch or a vision board or a 5-year strategy. I went back because on a random Saturday morning I sat down with a sketchbook, the first one I'd bought in years, and I drew something, not for a client, not for a collection, just for the feeling of it. And when I looked at what I had drawn, I felt something I hadn't felt in so long I'd almost forgotten its name. Joy. Not the performance of joy, not the relief that comes with approval, just clean, simple, unreasonable joy, the kind that doesn't need an audience. From that sketchbook, something very small and very real began. I started a tiny sustainable clothing label out of my apartment. No investors, no strategy, no announcement. I sourced small amounts of fabric, natural, tactile, honest fabric, and I made pieces. Slowly, carefully. Pieces I actually wanted to wear, pieces that had feelings stitched into every seam. I started a newsletter alongside it. Not a marketing newsletter, just writing. About fabric and how it feels against skin when you're grieving. About the way a well-made garment can be an act of self-respect. About femininities and what it costs and what it's worth. Almost nobody read it. Maybe 40 people at the beginning. And I wrote every single edition with the same care I would have given to 40,000, because I finally understood that the number in the audience was never the point. For the first time in my adult life, I was doing something where the entire value lived in the doing, not in the being seen doing it. The joy didn't arrive all at once. It came the way a sunrise comes, not as a switch being flipped, but as a slow, inevitable warming. First a little light at the edges, then more. Then, one ordinary morning, you look up and realize it's fully day. But let me tell you something about growth. The world does not simply step aside and applaud your transformation. It tests you, repeatedly. Sometimes the same tests in different costumes. There was a family gathering, a birthday, nothing dramatic. We're a relative. with genuine warmth and absolutely no self-awareness, looked at what I was building and asked, "But when does it turn into real money?" And I want you to notice what I did not do. I did not get defensive. I did not over-explain. I did not feel the floor drop out from under me the way it once would have. I just smiled, a real smile, not a performed one, and said, "I'm exactly where I need to be right now." And I meant it, every syllable. Around that same time, the colleague who had spent years taking credit for other people's work had climbed very high indeed. She was visible, celebrated, featured, and she reached out. Casually, the way people do when they expect you to be impressed by them. I think she expected to find me bitter, diminished, still in the corner where she left me. Instead, she found someone who genuinely felt nothing but free. No resentment, no competition, no score to settle. Because when you stop running someone else's race, you stop caring about their position in it. Her success had nothing to do with my story anymore. And that is what healing actually feels like. Then one afternoon, an email arrived from a small but well-respected sustainable fashion magazine. Someone who had stumbled onto my newsletter had shared one of my essays with their editor. They wanted to feature the label. A real feature. Photographs, interview, distribution. And I almost said no. The old fear rose up immediately. The terror of being seen, of being measured, of being found lacking. But I sat with it for a moment, and I asked myself the same question I'd been asking since that bathroom floor. Am I doing this for them, or for me? And the answer this time was clear and clean. I wanted to do it because it excited me, because it connected the work to people who might genuinely need it, not for validation, not to prove anything, not for the approval of anyone from my past, just because it felt right in a way that was entirely my own. I said yes, and it felt nothing like any yes I had ever said before. Here is what nobody tells you about proving people wrong. It keeps you chained to them. Every morning you wake up and your first thought is about someone who hurt you, dismissed you, underestimated you. You have handed them the keys to your life. You are living in reaction to them. Your success is defined by their failure to see you, and that means, on some fundamental level, they are still the ones in control. But proving yourself right? That's something else entirely. That's waking up and asking what you believe, what you value, what you want your one irreplaceable life to actually look like. That's building something with your hands and your heart that has your fingerprints all over it. Not as a message to anyone, but as a truth about who you are. The difference between those two lives is not money. It's not status. It's not even success by any traditional measure. The difference is peace. The kind of peace that doesn't depend on anyone else's reaction. The kind that holds steady when the room doesn't applaud. The kind that knows its own worth quietly, without needing to announce it. I am not where the world expected me to be. I am not where I once expected myself to be, if I'm honest. I don't have the linear career, the traditional markers, the story that makes sense in a 2-minute summary at a dinner party. But I am somewhere better. I am exactly where I chose to be. And that sentence, for someone who spent 15 years living inside other people's choices, is the most radical thing I've ever said. The relationships that found me after I stopped performing were different from everything before. Quieter. More honest. Less dazzling and infinitely more real. People who liked me without needing me to be anything other than what I actually was. Friendships that didn't require a performance, a kind of love that didn't ask me to shrink. And my mother, my complicated, grief-carrying, hard-loving mother, said something to me recently that I will hold for the rest of my life. We were on the phone, just talking about nothing in particular, and there was a pause, and she said very quietly, almost like she was surprised by herself, "You seem happy." She didn't say, "I'm proud of you." She didn't say I was wrong. She just noticed, really noticed, for maybe the first time that her daughter had found something true. And coming from her, "You seem happy" was everything. It was enough. It was more than enough. Because I had finally stopped needing it to be anything more. So let me ask you something before you go. And I want you to sit with this, really sit with it. Are you building a life, or are you building an argument? Because there is a version of you that exists beyond the need to be right in someone else's eyes, beyond the exhaustion of performing capability for people who decided your ceiling before you ever got started. There's a version of you that creates and loves and chooses and rests, not to prove a point, but because it is true, because it is yours. That version of you is not far away. She is not hiding, she is just waiting, very patiently, very quietly, for you to stop chasing their finish line and start drawing your own. If this story reached something real inside you today, if it cracked something open even a little, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment and tell me where you are in your own story. And if you're not subscribed yet, do it right now, because everything on this channel is built for the person who is done being small. I'll see you in the next one, and this time, build it for you.